Hi everyone, welcome back to the Vibrant Life Show here in Cloud Dojo. I'm Corey and this is your spot for inspiration on living a healthy, happy, and vibrant life. Today we are talking how to get things done, basically task management and all the stuff that goes along with it. So this is going to be kind of the bird's eye view of how tasks get managed for me personally and for a lot of people that I've worked with, a lot of things that have worked for them. So I want to share with you kind of the big picture and take you through like the whole process. So as you're watching this, I really don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have any of this in place. Like it's too much. It really can be done in bite-sized chunks. That's like the work that I do with people it's a lot. I mean, we do it over months of time of taking all these components step by step. So I just want to give you the overview, especially for people who are on this journey. I would say there's a point in the middle of this process where all the pieces are coming together and you're like, okay, but where's the traction? When am I going to really feel like, yeah, things are humming along? And I would say it takes a few months of really working at it through a system to create all these systems and then practicing working through them. So that's why I think a big overview is kind of nice to see like, oh yeah, I'm right on track with this process. Wherever you are, even if you're starting from the beginning, there's where you are and here's where you're headed. All right, so let's jump into the first thing, which is that we need a place to house all of the stuff that goes along with doing tasks in our lives. So the place for me is Google Drive, but whatever system you have that might have folders where you can keep documents. I think it's really important to have all of the supporting documents in one place. And I'll give you a little tip later on that a client recently shared with me a specific way he's organizing things in Google Drive to make it easier to have communication and pass responsibilities back and forth between partners as needed. So we'll get into that. So let's just imagine we have this Google Drive and I have a folder for every responsibility I have in my life. So I have the folder for my kids, my finances, food, holidays and traditions and things like that. All of those have folders. So we'll just look at a couple folders and a couple examples for today. So we'll look at the financial folder. That's one that pretty much everybody has, right? And within that financial folder, I might have some things like spending and budget. So that's kind of the day-to-day finances, making sure that we have a budget in the first place, right? So that's a document that goes into this folder. So for every kind of life season where we have a certain type of income coming in, I have a budget that I just lay out in a spreadsheet and I print it out and keep it in a binder because I like to be able to quickly reference, okay, here's about the ballpark that we have coming in every month and that we want to be budgeting to spend in each category. I also highly recommend having either a spreadsheet where you keep track of all your spending in those categories. Every week you kind of update it, or what many people find more simple is to have something like Simplify from QuickBooks or YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget. One of those things that you link to all your bank accounts and then it keeps track of categories for you, but it does take a little bit of setup. Anyway, all of that stuff requires some like how-tos. So I might need to remember how I set a few things up in Simplify in that app. And of course I have my budget that I like to kind of visually see based on what type of income we have at this season in our lives and what we've budgeted. I like to kind of have that out. And I also have a list of all the bank accounts, not all the like super private information because Google Drive's not a super private place, but basically all the accounts that we have, what we call them and what we use them for, what types of expenses are going to need to come out of different accounts. So essentially like our money plan is in there for our day-to-day spending and budgeting. And I have a list of all our bills. So I can use a checklist system to make sure that the bills got paid throughout the month. Most of them are on auto draft, but what if an auto draft didn't come out? I want to make sure I know about that. And that's where my little checklist comes in. So all of that kind of gets housed inside that folder. Okay, another example would be food. If you have heard of Eve Rodsky and the Fair Play book, which also is a fun game to play with your partner to divvy up different tasks and kind of like different roles in the family, then there are like, 8 or 10 cards all related just to food and feeding the family. Well, there are also plans and systems that go along with each of those ways of feeding the family. Like, you might have a list of breakfasts that the kids really like. I also have my ingredient prep checklist and my meal prep checklist. So I'd kind of do a little ingredient prepping and some little bit of meal prepping, usually once a week, sometimes a couple of times throughout the week, where I try to like hard boil some eggs ahead of time and chop a bunch of veggies and make some things for the lunch boxes that are going to be easy to throw in, and maybe make most of a couple of dinners, then I can just like throw them into the crock pot, things like that. I have a list. If you've seen my videos in previous videos on this channel, like I kind of go through it step by step because I have honed it down to be pretty efficient. So the thing about these folders is you might not have all these documents when you first start out. Like if you've been kind of winging it for a while and you're like, you know what, we're gonna get organized, let's put a folder, just make the folder. And then as you're like, you know what, I'm starting to notice that I tend to do the same thing regularly in this category, maybe I'll type that into a doc and I'll add that into the folder. Now, the really cool thing that a client recently pointed out to me is that with these folders, they basically kind of can encompass a role that can get divvied up within the family. So these folders can kind of house, like if you're typically the food person, you would probably hold a lot of those cards, like the grocery shopping, the meal planning for the week, the ingredient prepping, maybe some of that. And within that, you can also have maybe somebody's always in charge of packing lunches, and that can have its own little folder. And the neat thing is you can have a README document in each folder that basically just says who in the family is in charge of that folder. Like the buck stops with you if your name is on that README doc, is like, I'm in charge of this folder, right? So it's a good way to divvy up responsibility and have a place where, okay, if the responsibility is going to switch over to the other partner in your family for whatever reason, they can just be like, oh, okay, here's all your documents that you've been doing. So it's like all your hard work doesn't have to get reinvented. It can just get passed over if you decide to divvy things up differently. And maybe there's like, you're doing lunches now. Okay, here's a little list of what each kid likes in their lunches, and some quick things that are like not needing to be refrigerated that would go in those lunches. So as you start to make lists like that and you realize, oh, this is information I'm keeping in my head, you can just dump it into a document and it's there in perpetuity. Also in that README document that's in each of these folders, you can list, what does it mean to hold this role? What are the responsibilities within this role? And what are our family standards for that? I know this seems at first to people like, wow, we're doing a lot of upfront work, but it saves marriages. Number one, because it makes a more clear way to divvy up responsibilities. And number two, you have an agreement of, well, what are the standards? Because it's one thing to say, all right, I'm going to take on the spending. I can see spending and budget. I feel like there's been an unfair division of labor here, so I'll take that folder on. But it's another thing to say, and one of the standards for that bill pay spending role, being in charge of that, is paying the bills on time. And we can agree to that together in some family meetings that we set up, rather than,
I just didn't pay the bill on time, and then we're sitting at dinner with our kids, and my spouse says to me, you didn't pay the bills on time, and I'm frustrated, and then there's this tension.
Well, instead, we've already had a meeting about it at a scheduled time, and there's the standard, and if I get frustrated that the standard wasn't met, I can just write that down on our agenda for the next meeting that we have scheduled, which of course all this stuff gets to happen so much more easily when everything's set up that we're going to talk about today. So then you just have it on the list and you talk about it and you say, hey, we agree to these standards. It's just a lot easier conversation, right? So that's why I like this system of having folders and I really like the idea of having partners agree on what each folder is and divvying them up. If you already have a pretty organized Google Drive and then you're bringing this system in with your partnership, there's a little bit of cleanup to do. You can organize your folders within your Drive any way that you want. You just make sure that the folders that both of you need to see, right, that are kind of the ones being divvied up, maybe not for your own personal work or your own personal passions or things like that, but the things that might go back and forth between the family members, that's shared. So you can kind of look and see like, wow, this is what my partner's been up to, and like all the things on their plate. That's pretty cool, right? To be able to be transparent about that. All right, so we've got the supporting documents and we've got them organized, but how do we get things done? So the next is task lists. So There are 3 task lists that I like to have. One is actually an idea list, so that's within each folder. If you're thinking, wouldn't it be cool if someday we had a walk-in pantry? You can add that to the idea list in the home repairs and improvements folder, and whoever's in charge of that might look, oh, there's an idea. If down the road, once things become so organized in our lives that we have the abundance to do some home improvement projects, okay, there's one on the list. But it doesn't have to clutter what I call the master task list. The master task list is one that I personally like to keep in a project management app. I also, if you're just starting out and project management apps with all of their different options are a little overwhelming, you might want to start with just a simple project management spreadsheet. A lot of people, you might be like, even spreadsheets are crazy, but I do have a link below to where you can go to my free library and get a spreadsheet for project management. And that's very simple. So I'll just kind of start with how the spreadsheet works, and you can see that this could also be made into an app, and that's what I use. But essentially, for everything that needs to get done over the next few months, it's not like a regular routine. It's not something that happens on a regular basis. It's kind of a one-off thing. There's no regularity to it. These are just tasks that need to get done for the different roles in my life. In this project management system, whatever it is, you will have categories, and those categories are just going to correspond to each of those roles, each of those folders, right? So I'm going to have a budget and bills category. I'm going to have a long-term financial planning category if that's a role that I hold in the family as well. I'm going to have a food management category. So I have all these different categories, right? Within them, I have tasks, and those tasks have subtasks. So let's just say, for example, I don't yet have a system for meal and ingredient prepping, but I want to create that. So in the food category of my project management system, I'm going to put create a meal and ingredient prep plan. So within that, I'm going to have subtasks like plan time in the week. So schedule it in the calendar for planning our meals. So that's like how one list and then a task within it and then the subtasks within it would kind of get structured. And all these apps like To Doist and Get Things Done, they all have systems that are pretty similar to this spreadsheet, where you just make a list, you make a task within the list, and you make your subtasks within each task. So those are like the one-off tasks that aren't regular, but we also all have regular tasks that need to get done every day, every week, every month, sometimes quarterly and yearly, right? If it's like visits to the dentist or doctor and specialists and maintenance for your car and your home, all of those need lists. Like you need a checklist, right? So I have like a morning routine for myself, for the kids. I have an evening routine for myself and for the kids. We have weekend checklists of things that we want to get done every weekend. All of those are things that I have listed out and I've put in the folders where they need to go. I've also printed them and keep them in a binder because I like to have some analog, like visual reference of things and kind of be able to hold a piece of paper and look at it and see what that checklist is for the weekend, for example. But then also, you have to block that time out in your calendar or it won't get done. So every day I have a block in my calendar for my morning routine and a block for my evening routine and a block for keeping the kids on track with their morning routine. So for any regular task, it's got to be put into the calendar as a repeating event and happen, in certain times. Now, here's an example of where that can get tricky. I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, we have our morning routine at the same time because we all have to go to work or school. Of course, if you don't go to work or school and you're, working from home, you're homeschooled, then it's a little bit trickier to discipline yourself. Like we're always going to have this blocked out for our evening routine, and we're going to try to stick with that at least X number of days a week so that we have some sense of regularity in our schedules and in our internal clocks. It's really kind of important to have that. So even if you do have more flexibility, giving yourself those routines can be really important. But all of us are going to find times where there's a regular thing, maybe it's like a once a week type of thing, and it might feel like I can never find a time for it. So essentially there's 2 things for that. I'll give the example of our weekend reset. There are things we have to do every weekend or our week is stressful. Those include things like making sure the laundry is clean and that we have outfits at least enough picked out for the week. Everybody has socks and underwear and something to wear every day of the week, and so we're not like scrambling through laundry baskets. Of course, there are weeks when we are, and those are the more stressful weeks. Definitely have to pack that soccer bag every weekend to make sure that she's got all her stuff ready to go in the morning. This is also the time when I do meal prep for the week, and it's the time when the kids pack their lunches, so I have to have things ready to go for them to pack some lunches to get a head start on that through the week. So some weekends, like, we just can't do it, and we are scrambling a little bit more through that week for sure. Like, we're just doing more as parents the night before to get everything together, and we can do sort of less in the evenings, less free time, because we're trying to make sure we catch up on all those things that we could have done for the weekend. But most weekends we do it because I have a 3-hour block on the weekends in the shared family calendar, and whenever something gets scheduled that is going to be during that time, I always slide that time somewhere else. I'm like, okay, so we have like a birthday party that's scheduled at 2 o'clock on Saturday, and that's when we would normally do our weekend reset. Okay, we'll slide it up from 10 to 2 on Saturday instead. So we just are committed to that because we know how much nicer our weeks are when we have that weekend reset time, when I have that time to ingredient and meal prep and get the lunches ready and the clothes ready and the bags packed. Oh my gosh. It makes such a huge difference, and it's kind of nice to all be together working on the home together. We can tidy the home together, keep things more neat. So that's something that we schedule every single week, as much as we, sometimes we're out of town or something, but we schedule it pretty much every single week, and then we slide it around as the schedule changes. So there may be some circumstances like that through the week. All right, so now it's time to put in tasks, those like one-off tasks, right? We've got our regular routines scheduled in to our week. We've got time blocks for getting tasks done. I personally categorize it by getting tasks done for work and getting tasks done for family, because I have sort of different needs of spaciousness for those different categories in my life. I need to not have kids for work tasks, and I can have kids around for some family tasks. So I have those times blocked out differently in my calendar, but you could also just say like, just time to get stuff done in the morning and in the afternoon, okay? But you've got time blocks regularly in your schedule. Whether you work a 9 to 5 or not, you need to make sure you've got some block of time that's for getting my tasks done from my master task list. And you also need to make sure you have a planning time block every week where you sit with that master task list and you make a list of things you want to get done from that master list this upcoming week. So that's the real ticket, is looking at this master task list every single week, picking the most important tasks from whatever category, right? Just, okay, that category doesn't have any super important tasks this week, so I'm just not gonna do anything from it, but this category has like 3 important tasks. I'm gonna get all those done this week. And maybe that's all I can do, because it's really important to kind of underestimate. You can always add in more and still feel like, wow, I'm doing extra, versus over planning yourself and then feeling like bad about it. So every week, make a weekly task list, a weekly to-do list of things to get done from that master list. How do you make this weekly list? Well, if you're using an app, there are actually a couple of ways to. You can either use putting like deadlines on things to make them all appear in a this week list. Some project management apps have that. And you could also just have a this week list where you move tasks to this week's list when you decide you want to get them done this week. You could also just use paper. You could use the Notes app on your phone. It's not that important because it's going to be changing every week, so it doesn't need to like be kept in perpetuity. You just need to make sure you have a place where you're seeing the things I want to get done for the week. I personally often use a paper planner. So I created this spreadsheet for myself, or this spread for myself rather, where I have, the tasks on the left side, and I like to kind of look at them by category. And so I write down all the things that I want to get done this week. Another thing I've often used is just like a Notes app in my phone. If I don't have a lot to do, this seems to work. I'm just gonna look at my master task list. I'm gonna use my phone, jot down in a note this week, things to get done. And then I'm literally just gonna go into that time block for like Monday and write a couple things, or type a couple things in there that need to get done during that time block. And then when that time block comes up, I just click on that event in my calendar and I look at the things to get done. So that's another way to do it. Find whatever works best for you. So you've done your weekly planning and you've got your list of things to get done this week. Then you just need to schedule them into each day. So I try to schedule them into those time blocks for when I am going to be working on tasks for work or for the family. So in my task time block is when I'm typically going to be doing these things. So I want to make sure that somewhere it's recorded that I'm going to do this task on this day. You can plan it all out a week ahead of time if you feel like, yeah, my weeks are pretty predictable. I know that I'm going to be able to get this done on Monday and this done on Tuesday and this done on Thursday and so on, all those things. But you might want to do it day by day. It kind of just depends on how your weeks go. And if you find yourself planning a few days ahead of time or a week ahead of time and then having to erase a lot, then, that's when you want to probably just do it day at a time. Y'all, I think that's it. That's everything. We did it. We overviewed the entire system, and I hope you saw that it can be flexible to meet your needs, but there's some basic principles. I hope that inspired you, and I also understand if it overwhelmed you, but I just encourage you to let it be what it is at this moment and just know there's a path. And you just jump into the path wherever you are and you keep taking steps forward. And if you're interested in some guidance with that, of course, reach out at CoreyKennedy.com and we can have a session and see if I can help give you some guidance in these areas. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Here is wishing you a healthy, happy, and vibrant week ahead. And I'll see you next time here in Cloud Dojo. Bye.